Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. I'm Jonathan Freedman, and our next guest needs no introduction, but we'll introduce him nonetheless. Marc Z, Legal Staffing with an employment update. Great to see you again, Marc.
John, great to be here. Great to be back to talk about some timely employment issues as we continue with our employment updates in terms of our Back to Work series.
Little did we know when you went into this industry that you'd have so much topical and timely stuff to discuss all the time.
I know, it's amazing, and what I was going to say, it's every day things change. And what I wanted to discuss, so in our last show, we talked about what will it look like when we come back, or what are employers doing or thinking, and the pendulum has swung now because a lot of employers are using Labor Day at the end of the summer to have the big changes in terms of the employees coming back. They're doing that because of school. A lot of people had pre-planned summer vacations, or a lot of wanted to give people time to get their childcare in order, or just transition better. And so now we're at a situation where entering August in a week and or less, and people have to plan in terms of what is my status going to be when I come back to work. So that status is probably three different types of lanes. The first lane is for employees that are been with these organizations and the companies and firms. What are you doing now? We've been working remotely. Well, who's we? So for example, if you're in a law firm with attorneys, a lot of attorneys are going to continue to be allowed remote, but now firms are setting parameters. We would really like to see you maybe a day or two a week to start. And then as we get deeper into the fall, maybe 3 days. And by the new year, maybe have you in on a regular basis. At the same time, other firms are saying, we're coming back to work full time, but we're going to give you a bank of remote days. Another, continuing that lane, employers have said, you will come back, but there will be a hybrid schedule, 3 days in, 2 days out, whether you're a lawyer or support staff, an executive, management, that type of thing. So that's that challenge in terms of how we're going to be scheduled, because a lot of the employers on the management side really want people back, and it's trying to have people come back in a way that makes people comfortable and continue that transition, especially as we're dealing with an uptick in COVID, an uptick in terms of the reality of coming back. The other lane is the new hire lane, John. People who will move for positions really are demanding some kind of hybrid or some kind of totally remote, or I'll come into the office as needed, but I really want to work remote. Other people, particularly with smaller companies, organizations, they're willing to come in, there's no issue. So it's really, if it's a big organization, usually it breaks down to departments, or there's some kind of policy and in terms of that, but it's literally attracting talent at the same time, not giving up in terms of structure and not showing favoritism one way or another. So in terms of existing people.
It's interesting because it's putting a fair amount of, I want to get you to your last point, but it's putting a fair amount of strain on leadership to create new policies and guide those policies. And then I think we're going to see a whole new set of challenges around adherence and compliance with these policies. You're going to have compliance officers in large organizations who are suddenly worried about Jimmy, who never comes in, violating policies. So, it's complicated.
Correct. And you helped me transition. The last thing is enforcement, in terms of that's the last path in terms of consistency enforcement. Employees will say, okay, I'm coming in, but what about the people who are not vaccinated? And if they're not vaccinated, what's going to be in terms of mask policy? What's going to be in terms of people, certain employers will say, well, we want everybody that comes to work vaccinated. well, what's the enforcement of that? And then a lot of employers are walking on eggshells in terms of saying, okay, we'll enforce that, or we strongly advocate for people to come in. And I will tell you, we have candidates that we meet and we say, look, they have protocols, everybody's been vaccinated, so you don't have to wear a mask. Well, I'm not vaccinated, so do they need me to wear a mask? Well, why aren't you vaccinated? But we have to be very careful because obviously there could be a disability issue in terms of health or religious, or some people just make those decisions and you know what, I'll get vaccinated if I need to. And those are what's affecting the market, because there could be a domino effect in terms of an uptick in sickness.
Well, I'd imagine there's going to be a significant trend. I don't know what the overall statistics are. I know in our region of the country, healthcare industry is direct healthcare, direct to patient care is a huge employer, and governments are starting to see the trend of requiring employees to become vaccinated. In certain metropolitan areas, New York and Los Angeles have recently required it as of a certain date. And what's interesting to me, and we talk about staffing and the shift of landscape, is we may potentially have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people who choose not to get vaccinated in those industries that are now going to be at play and moving around because they won't be able to go back to their former positions. And so, we're going to see, I think, another pretty sizable shift in some places where, DC, a lot of government workers. Well, what happens when 30% of them choose not to get vaccinated if it becomes mandated? So it's going to be an interesting shift through the fall, I think, where there's going to be a lot of play again. And, again, with every change comes opportunity. Well, perhaps people who are vaccinated can suddenly step into nice roles because those positions are opening up. So it's interesting. It's there's a lot of flux as always in the market. I think the one thing that we've all become accustomed to over the last couple of years, more so than in the past, is you can plan all you want, but be prepared to pivot and be prepared to be flexible, because change is, the only constant is change. So it's fascinating. Now, Marc, what are you seeing? Are you starting to see law firms in particular that you deal with grappling with the notion of requiring vaccination of people, or are we not quite seeing it trickle down to the private sector yet?
I think law firms would like everybody who comes in to be vaccinated. I think they're being very careful. I think what they're saying is, if you're going to come back in the office, we want you vaccinated, but then we want you back in the office, right? So I think that's something that a lot of employers and law firms are grappling with. How do we deal with the vaccination issue? And the majority of employers are still not requiring it. And they're saying, okay, if you're not vaccinated, you've got to wear a mask. But that sort of puts you out as a standout. So everybody, when you're wearing a mask, everybody knows you haven't been vaccinated. And then you have to explain it. And that gets a lot of the workers now angry. It just, how people didn't like people wearing masks before, then people wanted people wearing masks. Now we're back to the point that, why are you wearing a mask? Weren't you vaccinated? So it creates some hostile employment issues in terms of in the office. So some people are choosing, if they're at a certain stage of their life, to retire, whereas other people are still trying to see if they can work somewhat remotely or work something out. But some people are still adamant about not being vaccinated. So I think in the next month or two, and we'll be here to discuss that, I think you're going to see some stronger lines drawn in the sand.
I tend to agree, and I think this issue that we're just seeing at the forefront, or we're sort of at the precipice of it beginning, I think is going to take more shape, and will, as I said, have pretty interesting implications for the market. And your phone will probably be ringing more off the hook. Well, hopefully that's the case than it has been, with people saying, well, we just lost 7 people. I need to fill those holes, and so forth. So it'll be interesting. No doubt.
Will be interesting. It will be interesting. I mean, this is a amazing time in our economy, and but at the same time, that's a ripple which is creating more of a shortage as people are retiring. People are choosing to only work on their terms, and employers can only be flexible to a certain point because they have internal equity issues, just like when it comes time for compensation. So
Yeah,
it'll be interesting.
Absolutely. Mark, always a pleasure to talk with you. Great to have you back on a segment for Radio Entrepreneurs. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Thanks, John. First of all, it's great being with you. Thank you for having me on the show. People can Google Marc Z, M-A-R-C, and the letter Z, and we'll come right up, or go to marczlegal.com, marczlegal.com, or 617-338-1300.
Mark, you're going to have to hold yourself out as the social media guru or the SEO guru. If I can Google Marc Z and you come right up to the top of the page, that's impressive.
Remember, Mark with a C, Z. The other one is Mark Zuckerberg. I'm not him.
You're much more unique, Mark, in a lot of ways.
Thanks,
Great to have you on, and we'll be right back with another segment on Radio Entrepreneurs.